The morning of October 3rd, 1943, arrived cold and grey over the Kummersdorf proving grounds, 40 miles south of Berlin. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber stood in the weapons testing facility's observation room, watching as ordnance technicians unpacked a rifle that would fundamentally challenge everything the Wehrmacht believed about infantry combat doctrine. The weapon was an M1 Garand, serial number 1,347,219, captured 3 weeks earlier from the body of an American soldier killed during the Allied landings at Salerno. Unlike most battlefield recovery items, this rifle had survived the chaos of combat nearly intact. The stock showed minor damage, the barrel retained its rifling, and most importantly, the complex semi-automatic mechanism remained functional. Weber, a veteran small arms specialist who had evaluated captured weapons since the invasion of Poland, immediately recognized something different about this American rifle. It wasn't the weight, though at 9.5 pounds it was substantial. It wasn't the caliber. The .30-06 cartridge was familiar from captured American weapons in the previous war. What caught his attention was the N-block clip system and the promise of 8 rounds of semi-automatic fire without manual bolt operation. The German army in 1943 relied primarily on the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle that required the soldier to manually cycle the action after each shot. It was accurate, reliable, and represented 50 years of Mauser engineering excellence. But it was fundamentally a manually operated weapon in an increasingly mechanized war. Standing beside Weber was Oberst Heinrich Müller, chief of the Heereswaffenamt Small Arms Division, and the man responsible for evaluating all foreign weapons that might provide tactical insights for German forces. Müller had travelled from Berlin specifically for this evaluation, bringing with him explicit orders from the Oberkommando des Heeres. The Americans were proving unexpectedly difficult opponents in Italy. Understanding their equipment advantages was now a strategic priority. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The test program would span 14 days, involving mechanical evaluation, firing tests, field trials, and most critically, comparative analysis against standard German infantry weapons. The goal was straightforward. Determine whether the M1 Garand represented a significant tactical advantage, and if so, whether German industry could produce a comparable weapon. What Weber didn't know, standing in that cold observation room on an autumn morning, was that his final report would reach the desk of Adolf Hitler himself, and the conclusions would be considered so demoralizing that portions would be classified to prevent their distribution among frontline troops. The 1930s had witnessed a fundamental transformation in infantry doctrine worldwide. The devastating lessons of the Great War, where bolt-action rifles proved inadequate for modern combat's rapid tempo, had prompted every major military power to investigate semi-automatic weapons. The question wasn't whether such weapons were desirable. Everyone agreed they were. The question was whether they could be made reliable, cost-effective, and suitable for mass production. Germany had pursued several semi-automatic rifle programs during the interwar period. The Gewehr 41, developed by both Mauser and Walther, entered limited service in 1941, but both versions suffered from complexity, weight, and reliability issues. The gas-operated system was temperamental, requiring meticulous maintenance that frontline conditions rarely allowed. Production numbers remained limited, fewer than 100,000 of both models combined by 1943. The Soviet Union had developed the Tokarev SVT-38 and its refined successor, the SVT-40. German troops had captured thousands of these weapons during Operation Barbarossa and subsequent campaigns. Some units, particularly on the Eastern Front, preferred captured Tokarevs over standard-issue Kar-98s for certain tactical situations. However, the Soviet rifles also demonstrated reliability problems in extreme conditions, and their complex disassembly procedures made field maintenance difficult. The United States had taken a different approach. Rather than rushing a semi-automatic rifle into service, American ordnance specialists had spent nearly 2 decades refining their design. John Garand, a Canadian-born engineer working at Springfield Armory, had begun development in the early 1920s. His design underwent continuous testing and modification throughout the 1930s. By 1936, the M1 Garand was adopted as the standard service rifle for the United States Army, the first semi-automatic rifle to achieve this status in any major military. Production ramped up slowly at first, then accelerated dramatically after Pearl Harbor. By 1943, Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms were producing M1 Garands at a combined rate exceeding 4,000 rifles daily. German intelligence had tracked this development with interest but not alarm. Semi-automatic rifles were known quantities. The Germans possessed their own versions, albeit in limited numbers. The conventional wisdom within the Wehrmacht's leadership was that semi-automatic rifles represented an incremental improvement over bolt-action weapons, useful but not revolutionary. This assumption would prove catastrophically wrong. The tactical environment in Italy during autumn 1943 had exposed German infantry to sustained combat against American forces, equipped entirely with M1 Garands. The after-action, reports filtering back to Berlin, described a disturbing pattern. German infantry, armed with Kar-98s, were consistently outgunned in firefights at ranges between 100 and 400 meters, the critical distance where most infantry combat occurred. A German infantry squad, typically armed with 8 Kar-98 rifles and 1 MG-34 machine gun, could deliver approximately 40 aimed rounds per minute from their rifles, 5 rounds per man, assuming rapid bolt operation. An American infantry squad, armed with 8 M1 Garands and 1 Browning automatic rifle, could deliver approximately 160 aimed rounds per minute from their rifles alone, 20 rounds per man with the semi-automatic action. The volume of fire differential was 4-1 in favor of the Americans, and that calculation didn't account for the psychological impact of being on the receiving end of that sustained fire. German soldiers reported that American infantry could maintain suppressive fire indefinitely, pinning down defenders while maneuvering elements flanked positions. But the raw numbers only told part of the story. The real advantage was tactical flexibility. A German rifleman who spotted a target had to aim, fire, work the bolt to eject the spent cartridge, chamber a new round, reacquire the target, and fire again. This cycle required approximately 3 to 4 seconds per shot for a trained soldier, longer under stress. An American rifleman could aim, fire, and fire again without removing his cheek from the stock or losing sight picture. The rifle's semi-automatic action absorbed recoil, ejected the spent case, and chambered a fresh round automatically. The soldier simply pulled the trigger again. 8 shots as fast as the trigger could be pulled, all while maintaining aim on target. This was the context in which Hauptmann Weber began his evaluation. The German army needed to understand precisely what advantage the M1 Garand provided, and more importantly, whether that advantage could be countered through tactics, training, or the development of comparable German weapons. On October 4, 1943, the mechanical evaluation phase began. Weber and his team of 6 ordnance technicians completely disassembled the captured M1 Garand, documenting every component, measuring every dimension, analyzing every aspect of its design and construction. The rifle consisted of approximately 62 individual parts, a reasonable number that suggested thoughtful design rather than over-engineering. By comparison, the Gewehr 41 Walther variant contained over 90 parts, many requiring precise fitting during assembly. The operating mechanism was elegantly simple. A gas port near the muzzle diverted a small amount of propellant gas from the fired cartridge into a cylinder beneath the barrel. This gas pressure drove a piston rearward, which rotated and unlocked the bolt. The bolt travelled rearward, extracting and ejecting the spent cartridge case. A recoil spring then drove the bolt forward, stripping a fresh cartridge from the N-block clip and chambering it. The entire cycle occurred in approximately 1/10 of a second, faster than human perception. What impressed Weber most was the reliability engineered into every aspect of the design. The gas system was self-regulating, automatically adjusting to different ammunition pressures and environmental conditions. The bolt had substantial mass and robust locking lugs that could withstand pressures far exceeding normal operating levels. The trigger mechanism was straightforward, with minimal components that could fail or require adjustment. The N-block clip system, while unusual, demonstrated remarkable ingenuity. The entire 8-round clip loaded into the receiver from above, pushed down until it locked into place. After the final round was fired, the empty clip ejected automatically through the top of the receiver with a distinctive metallic ping. The soldier simply inserted a fresh clip and continued firing. German ordnance engineers had traditionally favored external box magazines or stripper clip systems for feeding ammunition. The N-block design seemed crude at first examination, a throwaway clip rather than a reusable magazine, but Weber recognized the advantages. The clip was lightweight, stamped from thin steel, costing perhaps 5 cents to manufacture. It could be preloaded at factories or supply depots, ensuring consistent ammunition feed. And because the clip was contained entirely within the receiver, it was protected from damage and dirt. Oberst Müller visited the laboratory on the second day of evaluation. He examined the disassembled components carefully, picking up the bolt assembly and studying its machining quality. "This is excellent manufacturing," Müller observed, turning the bolt in his hands. "Look at these tolerances. The locking lugs are precisely cut, the extractor is robust. Everything is designed for long service life with minimal maintenance." Weber nodded. "The Americans are approaching rifle production the way they approach automobile manufacturing," he explained. "Standardized parts, systematic quality control, designs that prioritize reliability over theoretical performance. This rifle will function in mud, sand, extreme cold, or tropical humidity. Our Gewehr 41 requires careful cleaning and lubrication. This weapon simply works." Müller's expression darkened. "Can we produce something comparable?" Weber hesitated before answering. "Given unlimited time and resources, yes. But matching this level of manufacturing sophistication while fighting a three-front war, that's a different question entirely. The Americans started production in 1937. They've spent 6 years refining the process. We're trying to catch up while our industrial capacity is stretched beyond limits." The firing evaluation began on October 6 at the Kummersdorf rifle range. Weber had assembled 4 test shooters, all experienced marksmen with extensive combat experience. The goal was comparing the M1 Garand's practical accuracy and handling characteristics against standard German infantry weapons. The test protocol was straightforward. Each shooter would fire 50 rounds at man-sized targets at ranges of 100, 200, 300, and 400 meters. They would fire from standing, kneeling, and prone positions, simulating combat conditions. All firing would be timed to assess the speed advantage of the semi-automatic action. Unteroffizier Klaus Richter, a veteran infantry NCO with 3 years' service on the Eastern Front, fired first. He approached the firing line carrying both the M1 Garand and his personal Kar 98K for comparison. Standing position, 100 meters, 10 rounds as fast as accurate fire allowed. Richter raised the Garand, settled the sights on the torso-sized target, and began firing. The shots came in rapid succession, approximately 1 per second, the rifle's report echoing across the range. 8 rounds, then the distinctive ping as the empty clip ejected. Richter paused to reload, fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar N-block clip, then fired his final 2 rounds. Elapsed time: 14 seconds for 10 rounds, including 1 reload. Richter then repeated the exercise with his Kar 98. The contrast was immediate and stark. Each shot required working the bolt, a deliberate motion that disrupted aim and added time between rounds. The 5th shot required reloading from a stripper clip, further slowing the process. Elapsed time: 31 seconds for 10 rounds, including 1 reload. The difference was more than doubled. At the range where most infantry combat occurred, the American rifle allowed more than twice the rate of fire compared to the German standard weapon. Weber observed the target results through binoculars. Both rifles had achieved similar accuracy, approximately 70% hits on the torso-sized target. The difference wasn't precision, it was tempo. The American soldier could maintain pressure on the enemy continuously, while the German soldier was effectively half as effective in terms of rounds delivered. The evaluation continued throughout the morning. At 200 meters, The M1's advantage remained consistent. At 300 meters, where iron sight accuracy began degrading for both weapons, the semi-automatic action still provided roughly double the effective fire rate. At 400 meters, approaching the maximum effective range for iron-sighted infantry rifles, both weapons showed similar performance, though the Garand's superior sights provided marginally better target acquisition. The prone position tests revealed another advantage. Richter found that the Garand's semi-automatic action allowed him to maintain a stable shooting position throughout a string of fire. With the Kar-98, working the bolt required braking, cheek weld, shifting body position, and reacquiring the sight picture after each shot. Under stress, this disruption degraded accuracy significantly. During the afternoon session, Weber introduced a tactical scenario designed to simulate actual combat conditions. Two shooters would engage multiple targets appearing at random intervals at varying ranges. The goal was assessing how quickly a rifleman could shift between targets and engage effectively. The results were decisive. The Garand shooter engaged 13 targets successfully in the time required for the Kar-98 shooter to engage 7. The elimination of bolt operation between shots allowed the American-equipped soldier to maintain situational awareness, transition between targets fluidly, and sustain a rhythm of engagement that was impossible with manual bolt operation. Richter, after completing his firing sequence, requested permission to speak candidly. Hauptmann, I've been in combat continuously since 1940. I've fought Russians, British, and now Americans. I'm telling you professionally, if every American soldier has this rifle, we're fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. The fire superiority they achieve is overwhelming. In a meeting engagement at 200 meters, 8 Americans with Garands will defeat 12 Germans with Kar-98s simply through volume of fire. Weber documented these observations carefully. The mechanical evaluation had revealed excellent engineering. The firing tests were now revealing a tactical problem that extended far beyond individual weapon performance. The M1 Garand wasn't just a better rifle. It represented a fundamental shift in infantry combat doctrine that Germany hadn't matched. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. October 8th brought the reliability testing phase, designed to determine how the M1 Garand performed under adverse conditions that might be encountered in combat. Weber's team had constructed a mud tank, a sand exposure chamber, and a cold room capable of reaching -40 degrees Celsius, simulating winter conditions on the Eastern Front. The first test involved complete immersion in muddy water, simulating a soldier dropping his rifle while crossing a stream or during fighting in wet terrain. The Garand was submerged for 5 minutes, withdrawn, and without any cleaning or maintenance, taken directly to the firing line. Weber expected malfunctions. The gas system's small port and piston assembly seemed vulnerable to debris, but when Richter pulled the trigger, the rifle fired normally. 8 rounds cycled through without hesitation, the empty clip ejected cleanly. The team repeated the test 3 times with identical results. By comparison, when they subjected a Gewehr 41 to the same test, the rifle failed to cycle after the first shot. Mud had clogged the gas system, requiring complete disassembly and cleaning before the weapon would function again. The sand exposure test produced similar results. The M1 Garand was rolled in fine sand, coating all external surfaces and working its way into the action. Again, without cleaning, the rifle was fired. The first shot ejected a small cloud of sand particles from the ejection port, but the rifle continued functioning. Accuracy was minimally degraded. 8 rounds cycled completely. The cold weather testing revealed the only weakness Weber's team could identify. At -35 degrees Celsius, using lubricants typical of German issue, the M1's action became sluggish, occasionally failing to fully chamber rounds. However, when they applied minimal lubricant, essentially running the rifle nearly dry, functionality returned completely. The German practice of heavy lubrication, necessary for the Kar-98's bolt operation, actually degraded the Garand's performance in extreme cold. This was valuable intelligence. Soviet winters had taught German soldiers that proper cold-weather weapon maintenance required specific procedures. The M1 Garand would require similar adaptation, but the underlying mechanical design remained sound. Oberst Müller arrived at Kummersdorf for the interim briefing on October 10th. Weber had prepared a comprehensive presentation covering all testing conducted to date. The atmosphere in the briefing room was tense. Senior officers from the Oberkommando der Heeres attended, along with representatives from German small arms manufacturers who might be tasked with developing responses to the American weapon. Weber began with mechanical specifications, then moved through firing performance, and finally addressed reliability. His conclusions were presented factually, without editorial commentary, but the implications were unavoidable. The M1 Garand represents a significant tactical advantage in infantry combat, Weber stated. At typical engagement ranges, a soldier armed with this weapon can deliver twice the effective fire of a soldier armed with our standard Kar 98K. The reliability is exceptional, exceeding our Gewehr 41 by a substantial margin. The manufacturing quality suggests the Americans can produce these rifles in unlimited quantities. A major from the procurement office interrupted. Surely the weapon has weaknesses we can exploit. What about ammunition consumption? The semi-automatic action must burn through cartridges wastefully. Weber consulted his notes. That's a reasonable concern. In testing, our shooters averaged approximately 12 rounds per engagement, compared to 6 rounds with the Kar 98 to achieve similar results. However, because they achieved those results in half the time, the tactical advantage remains with the Garand. Additionally, the Americans have demonstrated logistical capabilities that dwarf our own. Ammunition supply doesn't appear to constrain their operations. What about the unblock clip system? Another officer asked. Ejecting the empty clip automatically seems to sacrifice stealth. The metallic ping alerts the enemy that the weapon is empty. Weber had anticipated this question. In theory, yes. In practice, combat is rarely quiet enough for such subtle acoustic signatures to matter. Additionally, the American soldier can reload in under 2 seconds. The tactical window for exploiting an empty weapon is extremely brief. We attempted to simulate this during our exercises. The Garand was never empty long enough to matter. The room fell silent. Finally, Müller spoke. Hauptmann Weber, give us your professional assessment. Can our infantry defeat American forces given this weapon's disparity? Weber chose his words carefully. Herr Oberst, defeat is possible through superior tactics, terrain advantage, prepared positions, or numerical superiority. However, in meeting engagements where forces are roughly equal, the American fire superiority will prove decisive. Our soldiers are well trained and highly motivated, but they're being asked to overcome a fundamental material disadvantage. Can we produce a comparable weapon? Müller pressed. Not in time to effect this war, Weber replied bluntly. The M1 Garand represents 6 years of development and 7 years of production refinement. Our industry is stretched between aircraft, armor, ammunition, and existing small arms production. Developing, testing, and producing a comparable rifle in quantities sufficient to re-equip the Wehrmacht would require 3 to 5 years minimum, assuming unlimited resources. We don't have 3 years, and our resources are definitely not unlimited. The briefing concluded without resolution. Weber was instructed to continue testing, focusing specifically on any tactical countermeasures that might negate the Garand's advantages. The unspoken reality, understood by everyone in the room, was that Germany had entered a war against an opponent whose industrial capacity exceeded their own by orders of magnitude, and that disparity was manifest in every aspect of military equipment, including the rifles their infantrymen carried. The tactical evaluation phase began October 12th, with field exercises designed to simulate actual combat conditions. Weber had arranged for 2 infantry squads to participate, one equipped entirely with captured M1 Garands and American ammunition, the other with standard German weapons. The scenario was straightforward. A meeting engagement where both squads would advance toward each other through wooded terrain, make contact, and fight until one squad achieved fire superiority sufficient to maneuver for advantage. Both squads were composed of experienced soldiers with comparable training and leadership. Exercise 1 began at 0800 hours. The squads started 1,000 meters apart, advancing along parallel forest trails. First contact occurred at 300 meters, when the point elements spotted each other, simultaneously. The American-equipped squad opened fire first, their Garands allowing rapid engagement without sacrificing accuracy. Within 10 seconds, approximately 40 rounds had been fired, forcing the German-equipped squad into cover. The volume of incoming fire was psychologically suppressive, even though these were blank cartridges and training conditions. The German squad attempted to return fire, but the Kar-98's manual operation meant each soldier could deliver only 1 or 2 rounds in the critical first 15 seconds of contact. Their MG-34 machine gun provided sustained fire, but the gunner was immediately targeted by multiple American riflemen, forcing him to displace. Within 3 minutes, the tactical situation was clear. The American-equipped squad had achieved fire superiority, pinning the German squad in their initial positions. American fire team leaders could maneuver their elements while maintaining suppressive fire from their base element, something nearly impossible when half the squad was working bolt actions between shots. Weber called halt to the exercise after 8 minutes. The American-equipped squad had maneuvered to within 100 meters and achieved flanking positions. In actual combat, the German squad would have suffered heavy casualties. They repeated the exercise 3 times, varying terrain and initial positions. The results were consistent. The semi-automatic rifles provided a decisive tactical advantage in the fluid, rapid engagements that characterized modern infantry combat. After the 3rd iteration, Unteroffizier Richter approached Weber with visible frustration. "Hauptmann, we're not losing these exercises because of poor tactics or insufficient training. We're losing because we can't maintain fire superiority. Every time we try to maneuver, the Americans pin us down with continuous fire. By the time we work our bolts and return fire, they've already displaced or taken better positions." Weber understood the implication. The M1 Garand wasn't just a better rifle in isolation. It fundamentally altered small unit tactics. An American infantry squad could operate with a fluidity that German squads couldn't match without their machine guns, and machine guns were heavy, conspicuous, and vulnerable to concentrated fire. The final field exercise introduced a German advantage, prepared defensive positions with clear fields of fire. This scenario favored the bolt-action rifle's inherent accuracy and the defender's ability to pre-position for optimal shooting conditions. The German-equipped squad occupied a tree line overlooking an open field approximately 200 meters wide. They had 30 minutes to prepare positions, establish firing lanes, and coordinate interlocking fire. The American-equipped squad would advance across the field, simulating an assault on prepared positions. This time, the results were more balanced. The German squad, firing from concealment and rest, achieved good hit ratios with their Kar-98s. The American squad took simulated casualties during their advance. However, once the American squad reached cover at the far side of the field, the situation reversed. Their sustained fire forced the German defenders to keep low, and their superior rate of fire allowed them to suppress multiple German positions simultaneously while maneuvering assault elements forward. Even with every tactical advantage, the German squad could only delay, not stop, the American advance. The exercise concluded with simulated close combat, both squads intermixed in the tree line, the tactical advantage neutralized by proximity. Weber's observation notes were blunt. In defensive positions with good fields of fire, the Kar-98K remains adequate. However, in mobile warfare, meeting engagements, or any scenario requiring offensive action, the M1 Garand provides overwhelming advantages. Recommendation: German infantry should avoid open combat with American forces, unless terrain and preparation provide substantial compensating factors. October 14th brought an unexpected complication. Oberst Müller arrived at Kummersdorf, accompanied by Reichsminister Albert Speer, Hitler's architect, and the man responsible for Germany's war production. Speer had taken personal interest in the weapons evaluation after reading preliminary reports. Speer's presence elevated the evaluation's importance dramatically. This was no longer a routine technical assessment. The findings would inform strategic decisions about resource allocation, production priorities, and possibly the entire direction of German small arms development. Weber conducted a demonstration for Speer, having Richter fire both the M1 Garand and the Kar-98K at various ranges. Speer watched silently, his expression revealing nothing. After the demonstration concluded, Speer examined the Garand carefully, working the action, inspecting the machining quality, weighing the rifle in his hands. "Hauptmann Weber," Speer said finally, "I need your completely honest assessment. Should Germany attempt to copy this rifle or develop our own equivalent?" Weber had been dreading this question. The honest answer was professionally dangerous, but Speer's reputation suggested he valued truth over comfortable fiction. "Herr Reichsminister, copying this rifle would be a mistake," Weber replied carefully. "The M1's design is optimized for American manufacturing capabilities, high-precision machining, quality steel, automated production processes. Our industry uses different methods, different tolerances, different materials. A direct copy would likely fail. And developing our own equivalent?" Speer pressed. "Possible, but not practical given our current situation," Weber said. "We would need 2 years minimum for development and testing, another year to establish production, and at least 18 months to produce sufficient quantities to re-equip even a portion of our forces. That's 4 to 5 years total, assuming no setbacks and unlimited resources." Speer's expression darkened. "We don't have 4 years." "No, Herr Reichsminister, we don't," Weber agreed. "My recommendation is that we focus resources on increasing machine gun production and improving tactical doctrine to compensate for the disparity in individual weapons. We cannot match American rifle technology in this war's time frame." Speer remained at Kummersdorf for 3 hours, reviewing all test data, watching additional firing demonstrations, and interviewing the test shooters about their experiences. Before departing, he pulled Müller and Weber aside for a private conversation. "Gentlemen, what you've documented here is disturbing," Speer said quietly. "The Americans have achieved not just a tactical advantage, but a systematic superiority in infantry weapons. Your reports will be distributed, but I must warn you, certain parties will not receive these findings well. The Führer, in particular, has strong opinions about German weapons superiority." Weber and Müller exchanged glances. They understood the implication. Their factual assessments might be interpreted as defeatism by those who preferred ideological certainty over uncomfortable reality. "I will ensure your findings reach appropriate decision-makers," Speer continued, "but I cannot protect you from political consequences if your reports are deemed demoralizing to frontline troops. I suggest you emphasize tactical countermeasures in your final documentation, even if those countermeasures are marginally effective at best." The comprehensive written report consumed 5 days to complete. Weber labored over every sentence, trying to balance technical accuracy with political survival. The document eventually reached 41 pages, supplemented by photographs, firing data tables, and tactical diagrams. The executive summary stated the findings clearly but diplomatically. The United States M1 Garand rifle represents the most advanced infantry weapon currently in widespread service. Its semi-automatic operation provides significant tactical advantages in rate of fire, sustained accuracy during rapid engagement, and psychological impact on enemy forces. German infantry armed with bolt-action rifles face measurable disadvantages in direct combat with American forces equipped with M1 Garands. The technical sections detailed every aspect of the Garand's design, providing German engineers with complete documentation should future development programs require reference material. Weber included precise measurements, metallurgical analysis of component steels, spring constants for the operating rod assembly, even the exact dimensions of the N-block clip feeding system. The tactical analysis section was necessarily bleak. Weber documented how the M1's rate of fire translated into combat advantages. He calculated that an American infantry squad could deliver approximately 240 rounds per minute of sustained, semi-automatic fire compared to 80 rounds per minute for a German squad's rifles, excluding machine guns. This 3-to-1 advantage in rifle fire meant American squads could suppress multiple German positions simultaneously, something previously requiring dedicated support weapons. The implications for offensive operations were severe. German infantry assaulting prepared American positions would face fire volumes that made maneuver exceptionally costly. The report's most controversial section addressed industrial comparisons. Weber had obtained production data through intelligence channels. Springfield Armory and Winchester were producing approximately 4,000 M1 Garands daily by autumn 1943. Annual production exceeded 1 million rifles. By comparison, total German rifle production, including all Kar 98 variants, Gewehr 41 models, and captured weapons refurbished for German service, reached approximately 900,000 annually. The Americans were producing more of their superior rifle than Germany produced of all rifle types combined. The mathematical implications are unavoidable, Weber wrote. Even if German tactical doctrine perfectly compensates for individual weapon disadvantages, which is unlikely, the production differential means American forces will achieve numerical superiority in addition to qualitative superiority. This combination presents extraordinary challenges for German operations in any theatre where American ground forces are committed. Weber included a section on potential countermeasures, though he held little hope for their effectiveness. He recommended increased emphasis on marksmanship training to maximize the Kar 98's accuracy advantages at longer ranges, aggressive use of machine guns to achieve local fire superiority, tactical doctrine, emphasizing ambush and prepared positions rather than meeting engagements, and immediate development of improved German semi-automatic rifles for post-war consideration. The final paragraph of the operational assessment was carefully worded but unmistakable in meaning. The M1 Garand cannot be matched by currently available German weapons. Tactical adaptations can mitigate but not eliminate American advantages. Strategic consideration should be given to avoiding large-scale ground combat with American forces, unless overwhelming advantages in terrain, preparation, or numbers can be achieved. Weber submitted the report to Oberst Müller on October 21, 1943. Müller read it completely, then looked up with an expression mixing respect and concern. "This is excellent work, Werner," Müller said quietly. "Thorough, factual, professionally presented. It will also be deeply unwelcome in certain quarters. I will forward it through channels, but I suggest you prepare yourself for unfavorable reactions." "I documented what we observed," Weber replied. "I can't change facts to suit preferences." "No, you can't," Müller agreed. "That's why you're a good engineer. But it may not make you popular with those who prefer comfortable illusions." The report travelled through Wehrmacht bureaucracy, reaching the Oberkommando des Heeres, then the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, and finally, through circuitous routing, Adolf Hitler's headquarters. The response came swiftly and was more severe than Weber had anticipated. On November 3, 1943, Weber was summoned to Berlin for a meeting with senior officials from the Wehrmacht High Command. The atmosphere was hostile from the moment he entered the conference room. Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, chief of the operations staff of the OKW, presided over the meeting. He held Weber's report in his hand, several passages marked with red pencil. Hauptmann Weber. This report suggests that German soldiers are inadequately equipped compared to American forces. Jodl began, his tone cold. It implies that our infantry cannot compete effectively in combat. Do you stand by these conclusions? Weber chose his words carefully, aware that his career and possibly his freedom hung on this conversation. Herr Generaloberst, I stand by the factual observations documented in the report. The M1 Garand provides measurable advantages in rate of fire and sustained accuracy. These are not opinions but results from controlled testing. And yet you conclude that we should avoid combat with American forces, Jodl continued. This is defeatist language that could undermine morale if circulated among troops. I concluded that tactical caution is warranted when facing opponents with superior weapons, Weber replied evenly. This is prudence, not defeatism. A commander who ignores his enemy's advantages is negligent, not confident. Another officer, whose nameplate identified him as representing the SS, leaned forward. Perhaps the issue is not the American weapon but German training and motivation. Properly motivated soldiers can overcome material disadvantages through superior will. Weber felt anger rising but suppressed it. Herr Standartenführer. Motivation cannot change the mechanical fact that a semi-automatic rifle fires twice as fast as a bolt-action rifle. Courage is essential, but it doesn't make bullets travel slower or bolts cycle faster. Our soldiers are brave and well-trained. They're being asked to fight with inferior tools. The meeting deteriorated from there. Weber defended his methodology, his conclusions, and his professional integrity for nearly 2 hours. Several officers suggested his testing was flawed or his analysis exaggerated American advantages. Weber calmly referred them to specific data points in the report, offering to repeat any tests they questioned. Finally, Jodl concluded the meeting with a directive. The report would be classified as restricted distribution. Only officers at regimental level or above would receive copies. The tactical recommendations would be edited to remove language that might be interpreted as suggesting American superiority. Weber was ordered to prepare a supplemental document emphasizing the Kar-98's advantages in accuracy and reliability under extended service. Weber agreed to the supplemental document, recognizing he had no choice. However, he refused to modify the original report's factual conclusions. "The data stands as documented," he said firmly. "I will not falsify test results regardless of who finds them uncomfortable." Jodl stared at him for a long moment, then dismissed him with a curt wave. Weber left Berlin uncertain whether he'd just ended his career, but certain he'd maintained his professional integrity. The supplemental document Weber prepared was technically accurate, but emphasized areas where German weapons performed adequately. He noted the Kar-98's superior accuracy at ranges beyond 400 meters, though he knew such long-range precision rarely mattered in actual combat. He documented the Kar-98's simpler maintenance requirements and lower production cost, though these advantages were minimal compensation for the tactical disadvantages. The document concluded with recommendations that were implementable if not particularly effective. Increased emphasis on long-range marksmanship could allow German soldiers to engage American forces at distances where the M1's rate of fire mattered less. Aggressive infiltration tactics could close to ranges where individual weapon characteristics mattered less than numbers and surprise. Heavy machine gun employment could compensate for individual rifle deficiencies. These were valid tactics, but Weber knew they were bandages on a fundamental problem. Germany was fighting an increasingly industrialized war with an industrial base 1/5 the size of America's, and that disparity manifested in every category of equipment from rifles to aircraft to trucks. By December 1943, copies of Weber's report, both the original comprehensive version and the sanitized supplement, had reached operational commanders throughout the Wehrmacht. The responses varied dramatically based on the recipient's combat experience. Officers with extensive fighting experience against American forces in North Africa, Sicily, or Italy found the report's conclusions obvious and unsurprising. They'd been reporting similar observations through after-action channels for months. The M1 Garand's advantages were well known to anyone who'd actually faced American infantry in combat. Officers whose experience came primarily from the Eastern Front, where they'd faced Soviet forces equipped with inferior rifles, found the report shocking and demoralizing. The concept that Germany might face opponents with superior individual weapons challenged fundamental assumptions about German military superiority. One response, from an oberst commanding an infantry regiment in Italy, was particularly insightful. "Weber, your report confirms what we've learned through bitter experience. American infantry squads can suppress our positions with rifle fire alone, freeing their machine guns for offensive use rather than defensive fire support. This changes the tactical calculus of every engagement. Your recommendations about avoiding meeting engagements are sound, but unfortunately, we rarely get to choose the circumstances of combat." Another response, from a division commander in France, was more hostile. "This report is technically competent, but strategically naive. Yes, the American rifle is superior in certain characteristics. However, German soldiers have consistently defeated opponents with superior numbers and equipment through superior tactics, training, and fighting spirit. I recommend focusing on maximizing our advantages rather than cataloging our disadvantages. Weber filed these responses, recognizing that commanders saw what their experience and temperament prepared them to see. Those who'd faced American firepower understood the problem. Those who hadn't yet encountered it preferred to believe German advantages would prove decisive. The captured M1 Garand that prompted Weber's evaluation remained at Kummersdorf for several months, used for additional testing and as a training aid for officers attending weapons familiarization courses. By early 1944, additional M1 Garands had been captured in Italy and France, providing more specimens for study. German attempts to develop counter-weapons produced limited results. The Sturmgewehr 44, an assault rifle firing an intermediate cartridge, showed promise but entered production too late and in too small quantities to affect the war's outcome. By the time Sache 44 production reached meaningful levels in late 1944, Germany's strategic position had deteriorated beyond the point where improved infantry weapons could matter. The personal consequences for Weber were mixed. He was not court-martialed or dismissed for his frank assessments, but he was also not promoted or given prestigious assignments. He spent the remainder of the war at Kummersdorf, evaluating captured weapons and training ordnance officers, useful work but far from the front lines where his expertise might have made a difference. In January 1945, with Soviet forces approaching Berlin, Weber was assigned to help destroy technical documents and equipment to prevent their capture. He personally supervised the destruction of files related to German weapons development, including his comprehensive report on the M1 Garand. However, Weber had kept a personal copy of the report, hidden among his belongings. This decision would prove historically significant. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Weber was detained by American military intelligence officers conducting technical exploitation of German research facilities. During interrogation, Weber mentioned his evaluation of the M1 Garand. The American officers, initially skeptical that Germans had conducted precauvateurs, such comprehensive testing, became intensely interested when Weber produced his personal copy of the report. The document was immediately sent to Springfield Armory, where engineers found the German analysis remarkably thorough and technically accurate. One Springfield engineer, reviewing Weber's metallurgical analysis of the Garand's bolt, commented that the German evaluation was more comprehensive than some internal American studies. Weber's documentation of the rifle's tactical advantages, written from an adversary's perspective, provided valuable validation of American ordnance decisions. The American interrogators treated Weber with professional respect once they understood his technical competence and honest approach to weapons evaluation. He was released from detention in August 1945 and eventually found work with the American occupation authorities, helping to document captured German weapons technology. In 1948, Weber immigrated to the United States, sponsored by former Springfield Armory engineers who'd been impressed by his work. He spent the next 15 years working as a consultant in the American firearms industry, contributing to the development of several post-war rifle designs. Weber rarely discussed his wartime work publicly, but in 1963, he was interviewed for an oral history project documenting World War II weapons development. The interviewer asked about his evaluation of the M1 Garand and whether he'd accurately predicted its impact on infantry combat. "I documented what I observed," Weber said, speaking in accented but fluent English. The M1 Garand was the finest infantry rifle of the war, not because it was perfect, but because it achieved an optimal balance of reliability, firepower, and manufacturability. American ordnance made exactly the right decisions in the 1930s, and by the time the war began, you had a mature, proven weapon in mass production. The interviewer pressed, asking whether German forces might have performed better with equivalent weapons. Weber's response was thoughtful. "Better weapons would have helped, certainly," he said, "but they wouldn't have changed the war's outcome." Germany faced enemies with greater population, greater industrial capacity, greater resources, and increasingly, greater technological sophistication. The M1 Garand, was one manifestation of that American industrial and engineering capability. Even if we'd matched your rifle, you'd still have had advantages in artillery, trucks, aircraft, logistics. Wars are not won by individual weapons but by systems, by the ability to produce, deploy, and sustain military force. America excelled at that systematic approach. Did you ever regret writing such a frank assessment of German disadvantages? No, Weber replied firmly. An engineer's duty is to report facts accurately. I would have been derelict to minimize American advantages simply to make my superiors comfortable. Did some officers consider my report defeatist? Yes. Were they wrong? Also yes. Truth is not defeatism. Recognizing reality is the first step toward rational decision-making. Germany's leadership too often preferred comfortable myths over uncomfortable facts. That failure was more damaging than any weapons disadvantage. The historical record confirms Weber's essential conclusions. The M1 Garand provided American infantry with significant tactical advantages throughout World War II. The rifle's semi-automatic action, reliability, and the massive scale of American production combined to give U.S. ground forces a consistent edge in infantry firefights. General George S. Patton famously called the M1 Garand the greatest implement of battle ever devised, and while that assessment was characteristically hyperbolic, it reflected the weapon's genuine effectiveness. American infantry could engage targets faster, transition between targets more fluidly, and maintain suppressive fire more effectively than opponents armed with bolt-action rifles. The production statistics tell their own story. By the war's end in 1945, the United States had produced approximately 6 million M1 Garands. This extraordinary production volume meant that essentially every American infantryman carried the same, reliable, effective weapon, a standardization that simplified training, logistics, and maintenance. By comparison, German forces used a bewildering variety of rifles throughout the war. The standard Kar 98K remained in production, but chronic shortages meant German infantry also carried Gewehr 41 semi-automatics, captured Soviet Tokarevs, captured French rifles, captured Czech rifles, and various other weapons scavenged from occupied territories. This diversity complicated ammunition supply, spare parts, logistics, and training. The M1 Garand remained the standard U.S. infantry rifle through the Korean War, finally being replaced by the M14 in the late 1950s. Many Garands remained in service with Reserve and National Guard units into the 1970s. This extraordinary service life, spanning more than 30 years as a frontline weapon, testified to the soundness of the basic design. Today, Friedrich Weber's comprehensive report on the M1 Garand resides in the U.S. National Archives, part of the massive collection of captured German military documents. Historians and firearms enthusiasts continue to cite it as one of the most thorough contemporary assessments of the rifle's capabilities, valuable precisely because it was written by an adversary trying to understand how to counter the weapon's advantages. The report's significance extends beyond its technical content. It represents a moment when professional military analysis confronted ideological preference, when factual observation challenged comfortable assumptions. Weber's insistence on documenting uncomfortable truths, despite knowing those truths would be unwelcome, reflects the difficult position of technical experts in totalitarian systems. Weber died in 1978 in Connecticut, having lived long enough to see the M1 Garand become a collector's item and sporting rifle rather than a weapon of war. In his later years, he occasionally attended firearms collectors' shows, where he would examine Garands with the practiced eye of an engineer who knew every detail of the design. A colleague once asked Weber which rifle he considered the finest he'd ever evaluated in his long career spanning both German and American weapons development. Weber's answer was immediate. The M1 Garand, he replied without hesitation. Not because it was perfect, no weapon is perfect, but because it was exactly what was needed, produced when it was needed, in the quantities needed. That's the true genius of weapons design, not achieving theoretical perfection, but achieving practical excellence at the scale required to affect outcomes. That was the lesson Weber learned in October 1943, standing at the Kummersdorf proving grounds, watching an American rifle outperform German designs across every meaningful metric. Superior weapons didn't guarantee victory, but inferior weapons made defeat more likely, and no amount of courage or tactical skill could fully compensate for fundamental technological disadvantage. The story of Weber's evaluation is ultimately about the collision between ideology and reality, between what totalitarian systems wanted to believe and what their technical experts knew to be true. Weber chose truth, documented it carefully, and paid a modest career price for his honesty. History vindicated his assessments completely. The M1 Garand that triggered Weber's comprehensive study, serial number 1,347,219, survived the war. After American forces recovered it from Kummersdorf in May 1945, the rifle was returned to the United States, refurbished, and eventually issued to another soldier. It served through the remainder of the 1940s before being retired and eventually sold as surplus. In 1983, a firearms collector in Pennsylvania purchased the rifle at an estate sale, unaware of its history. Only when he researched the serial number did he discover the weapon had been captured, tested extensively by German ordnance, and became the subject of one of the most comprehensive enemy evaluations of American weapons ever conducted. The rifle now resides in a private collection, a mechanical artifact that triggered a cascade of analysis, argument, and ultimately, historical documentation. It still functions perfectly, a testament to the robust engineering that impressed Friedrich Weber 40 years earlier. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.